Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Winning Over Stakeholders. My name is Fabian Lampe. I'm the founder of Advanced Procurement, and I will be your moderator today. With me, I have a panel of procurement experts with probably 100 years of experience across the three of them. And we want to talk to you about how you can win over stakeholders. And just before the session, Drasko made me aware that some people misunderstood our title slightly in the sense of we want to win over our stakeholders. But that is absolutely not what this is about. This session is about how we can win their trust, how we can win them over to be on our side in order to actually drive business impact. So with this, thank you very much for joining me. And let's start with a quick round of introductions. Drasko, as the host of the session, would you mind to start?
Appreciate it, Fabian. Thank you very much. Well, I'm a founder and a CEO of Cirtuo. Cirtuo is today a technology company with our technology, with our software. We support, but not only with the software, but also with our support in general. We make category managers more efficient in the category strategy process to develop, validate, and execute category strategies. We literally help them to align business requirements from the global, local, regional level, and together also align the category and supplier strategies.
Perfect. And we will get back to that in just a moment. Michael, would you do the next one?
Sure. Michael DeWitt, I lead our indirect spend management for Walmart International, which is everything outside the US, 6 procurement offices in 18 countries. Supporting 18 countries.
And if you haven't heard of Michael yet, he is world famous because he gave a speech at DPW last year where everybody is going crazy since then, including Drasko. So Sam, over to you.
Hi there. I'm Sam Frates. I lead the procurement organization at Mars in Europe. Many of your audience, I'm sure, know our brands. One of them wearing Snickers. Actually, I have one on my desk. We have a special edition one there for me.
Nice.
We manage about a few $1 billion to spend in Europe, everything from your usual cocoa, dairy, sugar, and that sort of thing, but also the indirect spend, logistics, marketing being some big things for us. Been at Mars for 5 years, 5 years before that at GSK, 5 years at Barclays before that, so I have a few different industries in my background, and early on worked with Drasko at Carney in the early part of my career. Thank you for setting up this meeting. It's a big passion area of mine. One thing I've always learned is that it doesn't matter how great your category strategy is, if you can't make it live through your category managers and with your business, it doesn't make a difference. So yeah, the key is here is brilliant business partnering and brilliant partnering with suppliers to bring it to life. So
perfect. You do not look hangry right now, so therefore I think
I'm fine.
All right, so let's get at it. Then our topic is winning over stakeholders, right? And the reason why we picked this topic is that we feel that there is still something between procurement and the business that is not sitting quite right. And we're wondering, why is that? But in order to get to that point, maybe Drasko, could you give us a little bit of background on the strategy alignment matrix, a topic that you introduced last year that actively talked about how you can align procurement across different elements of the spectrum with the business objectives. And so let's spend maybe 3-5 minutes on that so that we all have the common background.
With pleasure, yes. Look, I'm so many years in procurement, and my impression is that procurement is actually running after the wrong target in so many cases. Being strategic with procurement always starts with understanding what business wants, what are objectives and what are expectations. And in many cases, these objectives and expectations are not existing in writing, but you actually need to reach out to the especially senior stakeholders to understand where is the business heading. So to make the idea of the strategic procurement, how to use it and how to deploy it, understandable and illustrative, we develop a concept. We develop a matrix, which is called a strategic alignment matrix, which actually consists out of 4 layers. On top, you will have your procurement function. Then you have actually categories, suppliers, and negotiations. So there are 4 layers which you actually need to address with your strategy. And again, it always starts with the business. And the category strategies and supplier strategies serve to operationalize the larger or greater procurement strategy. So it's 4 layers, but it's also 4 steps you need to go through, which is understanding, identifying the business requirements, which is identifying internal and external challenges, but also opportunities, and then developing the strategies, procurement strategies, category strategies, supplier strategies, and if needed, negotiation strategies as well. And last but not least, strategy needs to be operationalized. You need to translate it into a set of initiatives to make it happen. I would like to refer to the webinar where we presented for the first time, I think it was June last year. You can find it actually on our homepage. And it has been never more important because there is expansion and acceleration of the business requirements in the last couple of years. To the old traditional ones like cost reduction and quality assurance, we added sustainability, growth, diversity. So the life of procurement people has become more challenging, and therefore we need more tools, methodological frameworks, and also technology to actually make it happen and translate strategies into the practice.
So what you're basically saying is the world of procurement has become more complex and more complicated. And so therefore we basically need more conversations and more engagement rather than less. But as I pointed out earlier, somehow it still feels that a lot of organizations or individuals struggle with having these conversations. Sam, what do you think is keeping people back?
Well, first thing to say, I'm so pleased that Cirtuo has got a tool with such a great name, Sam. I've been dying to deploy a tool under my name for a long time, so that's always a good start. Yeah, shortcut. I think there's probably 3 shortcomings that I see time and time again. The first is we don't use open-ended questions, right? So we tend to focus on requirements. You know, what do you want? What do you need? And we don't actually think about what the business is aiming to achieve, right? In its full color. I think the second thing is we often start with procurement objectives, right? So we've been cascaded savings objectives, resilience objectives, sustainability objectives, and so on. But we don't actually put the business objectives first and make that really nice link between the two. And the surface tensions when they don't, join up together. And I've always thought category managers are the best ones are the ones that start to think like a business leader, not just a procurement leader. And the third bit, I think, is that we overthink it, right? We overprocessify it. We use lots of templates. We think, right, I need to gather some requirements, and off we go. We try and force ourselves into it. The great category strategies live by the category managers that are constantly leaning into the nuances, of what the business is going through, of what's going on in the supply markets. And then they strategize with their business leaders, right? They bring them into the situation. So for me, they're the 3 areas. As a recap, not open-ended questions enough. We always just close ourselves down. We overthink it. We overprocessify it, and we're not really in tune with the business objectives.
Michael, is that what you have experienced in your career? Because you have gone through different industries as well and different roles, obviously.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think there's a couple things maybe to supplement or enhance what Sam said. One, I mean, I agree with your second point, especially that procurement has their own language. And when we do go through category strategies, it's intense and it's complex. And we tend to want to present everything to our stakeholders when we, are ready to talk about our category strategies. And it's just too much. We don't think about their perspective and, from a business perspective, it needs to be simple. The message has to be simple. And that's one challenge I think we have. But I think the biggest challenge is just every day our category managers get stuck in the tactical. And so they don't have time to think about long-term strategies, and it's a vicious cycle because as they focus on execution of projects and getting sourcing projects done, then they don't have time for strategy, and then they keep getting sucked into tactical because they need things next week, they need things next month. So I think for me, that's a constant challenge. Along with that is that sometimes category strategy managers look at execution of projects and building category strategies as separate bodies of work. And it's, you know, thinking about creating a category strategy, it's a lot of work, and that doesn't fit in their everyday work because they've got to execute and they've got to deliver savings. So getting them to realize that this is one and the same, they work together. Category strategies need to be built so that you can have long-term view on what is the business strategy, what is your sourcing strategy to get to where you're at now, to get to where the business needs to be years from now. And then you can set up your projects well ahead of time and prepare your stakeholders for that. So it's, you know, making sure that it's incorporated, those two, building category strategies and executing projects. Projects should come from category strategies, and it should be one continuous effort.
I think that very nicely aligns with what Drasko was pointing out, that it's a cascading element. But it seems a little bit that this kind of perspective of, I do my category strategy and I put it in a drawer, is coming from these offline times where it was this massive PowerPoint up to 150 pages that everybody felt like, oh, this is painful, I don't want to look at this for the next 2 years. Why there was a mental separation. Just to take a slightly different perspective, I know that Drasko, you feel that there's a little bit more than just being busy. What is your take on why people like to work in isolation sometimes?
I think the challenging piece for many procurement professionals or organizations will be the actually skill set needed to make it happen. In the last over a decade, we supported many category managers to develop their category strategies via our technology. So we were sitting with them quite often together and we were discussing how to make it happen. And it starts with the identification of the right stakeholders. I mean, it's simple with the peer-to-peer level, but peer-to-peer will be in many cases not always the right people, because the strategies will become then quite tactical. They have tactical expectations on procurement. So actually you need to go to the more senior stakeholders to make it happen. And then if you sit in a complex company like Walmart or Mars, you know, it's sometimes not easy to identify who the stakeholders are. So I can remember back then spending hours and hours talking about who the right stakeholders are. So it's about identifying the right stakeholders. Then it's about approaching them in the right way, in the right setup. Then it's about listening to them. They will tell something in their business language, what they expect, what they need, where is the business heading, again, in writing or not in writing. Then you need to make the translation, the first degree translation of the business into the business requirement on procurement. And then all of a sudden you will notice you will need to deconflict some of the business requirements because some of them are not supporting each other. Then you need to prioritize the business requirements and say, okay, this comes first, this comes second, and so on and so on. And then you make a second degree translation of the business requirements into a strategy. When you've done that, then you need to validate and prepare the storytelling and validate actually with your stakeholders. And then you actually translate everything into initiatives you need to mobilize, and by chance you need to escalate. So listen what I mentioned: identify, listen, translate, deconflict, validate, escalate, mobilize, you know. So there are a bunch of luckily soft skills, human skills, where the human intelligence is needed. So folks, good news, there will be a job in the future for procurement people. Wherever you need validation, judgment, risk appetite, working with people, talking with people, it's needed. But again, all that is hard work, and many procurement organizations are today not equipped for that in terms of capability or capacity, as mentioned earlier.
So you just rolled through it like a freight train, and so there were so many things that I would love to pick up on. Conflict being one of them, because I think everybody who has ever developed a category strategy and walked into stakeholders has the experience of people saying no. But before we go there, maybe just one quick question to, again, Sam and Michael. Do you feel that people struggle more with engaging senior stakeholders rather than their peers, or what's your take on that? Because as Drasko just outlined, working on a peer level is sometimes a little bit easier and more comfortable, but when we have these complex topics to then also approach somebody who is more senior can feel a little bit intimidating. Who wants to go first?
Well, Michael.
I'll jump in. Yeah. Well, first I want to say this is another reason why we like Cirtuo, because there's not many tech companies that the CEO that really understands what you're building the tech around. And of course, I mean, Drasko, understands this in depth. So I appreciate that from you, Drasko. Yeah, stakeholders, I mean, that is the key, is understanding for every category strategy who the specific stakeholders are. But it's also, as we know, it's not sometimes the people that you think it should be based on chain of command, right? It's people that are influential in that particular category. So for us, Walmart, it is complex. We have, different markets. So different categories, you have to think about who are the stakeholders, but also different markets, and every market has their stakeholders. And there are supporters and detractors. And one thing I've learned through time is, when there's detractors, because I guess I'm competitive, I want to win those detractors over immediately. And when they say no, I want to keep coming at them. But I've learned over time that's probably not the best thing to do. You find the people that are ready to work with you, right? That you can influence, that are ready to go, and then they will help to influence others. There's nothing better than somebody from the business that has had a good, experience with us in building a category strategy. They'll go tell their peers, hey, work with these guys. They add a lot of value. So I've stopped beating my head against the wall and trying to go aggressively at these detractors. And we just, I don't have time for that. There's plenty of people that are supporters. So I wanted to say that. And then the other part of your question was more around conflict.
No, like I will get back to that, but
Okay.
more about the seniority of our stakeholders and how that makes us feel different in approaching them.
Okay. Yeah, maybe Sam, you can jump in.
It's funny. I'm sitting here stewing because I've never had this challenge, and I don't expect my teams to. And although I know it's there, you're right. You have the most senior person in the room. They make the decisions, but I think I completely agree with Michael. The most senior person in the room is very often not the decision maker, right? They rely on their teams, their own stakeholder group, to make decisions. And so the real art here is being really clear and thorough in what your judgment is. Or if you don't know, go and forming the right judgment, and then working that through. So if I take Mars, it's a family-owned business, and it's very decentralized, and it's fully expected to be out. You should be able to network up and down the organization, and that is it, right? There's no hierarchy to work. Where you are successful is, as I mentioned, you're really in touch with the stuff that Drasko mentioned, what's going on in the business. You're really in touch with the supply market, and you're constantly playing around and understanding where's the magic going to happen. And you don't put the strategy in the drawer. It's living with you, right? And the stakeholders will be with you if they're in touch with it, it's serving what they need to achieve. Maybe I can give a small example of that. I remember it was the managing director for Barclaycard took me for lunch one day in a special restaurant, not the one with everybody else, and that was quite a proud moment for me, because she said, look, I want to say thank you because you actually understand what the supply base can do for my business objectives. And I knew I was onto something for two reasons. I was doing a couple of deals. One was on payment innovations. This was 2 years before Apple and Android had mobile phone payments. We were doing it on Nokia devices. And the other was on the internet security, right? Yeah, who can believe it? Who remembers Nokia? But the point was, I was doing an IP deal, not a purchase deal. I was negotiating how we can best co-develop this technology with our suppliers. When it came to online security, my team was negotiating licensing agreements to sell the technology that we had developed with our suppliers, right? That's when you're in a realm of not just buying and transacting. If you like, this category strategy is enabling the bigger business goal. And I think, and that was, you know, working every day from the MD all the way through to the CRO, right down to the tech guys as well, and with suppliers. I think that's when you know you're onto something. You're excited about what the business is trying to achieve. The rest becomes really easy after that.
It's just my personal experience. I had somebody in my team once who constantly felt sick when there was a very important meeting involving senior stakeholders. Might have been coincidence, but it also demonstrated there is a certain level of being uncomfortable with some of these discussions, especially if the objectives are not aligned necessarily, and there's a procurement objective and a business objective, and there's conflict. And so coming back to conflict now, Drasko, you have been doing this for a long, long time, and you serve loads of companies. So you probably have a perspective on what's winning. Is it more people struggling, or is it more people being like, yep, this is smooth sailing? Your take on it?
I still believe there is a lot of struggle. I remember when we deliver workshops and then say to people, hey, you will need to present your category strategy to the C-level, then you can literally sense how uncomfortable people are with that suggestion. And then they ask, well, why should I present it to C-level? And I say, because your category is 1 billion or 800 billion or 800 million, or, you know, so they just don't understand the dimension of what they do, you know. And I would doubt the CEO doesn't want to listen to a story about the 1 billion or 1/10 of his business, her business, you know. So it's the question of a kind of self-confidence, probably also motivation to do so, to approach the senior stakeholders. And they often quite wrongly assume, well, they know the story and the suppliers, and I don't need to tell it. But it's a lot about storytelling and how you present it. So we try to encourage category managers by saying them, hey, folks, you are not just category managers, you are CEOs of your categories, because they are so big, so significant. You are actually managing the categories, really. So there is a part which is, of course, has to do with self-confidence and motivation, but also, let's face it, talking to C-suite is not easy. If you haven't adopted or developed that language in the past, it takes some time to actually get there. I mean, starting with myself, took me some years to develop the language, to understand, to listen, to translate what they say, to understand how to develop the storytelling, how to balance between the big picture and detail. So it's quite a challenge for many category managers to do so.
That's a very interesting point, and transitions nicely on one of the questions I had about your individual journey towards stakeholder management and engagement, because I think, similar to what you just said, on day one, you might not be as versed in it as after 2 years or 5 years or 15 years. So, Michael, what has been your personal journey, and what have been some of the challenges or failures that you may have experienced along the way, and some of the learnings that you gathered as well?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to agree that C-level execs are scary. You know, they have the attention span of a toddler, and you have to figure out how to get their attention really quick and get out, get in, get out, be done, right? Because they just don't care about most of the stuff that you think they should care about, right? They have so many things happening. So I've learned over time too how to really, you know, hone in on what's most important to communicate with C-levels. But as far as, you know, kind of what I've seen, the journey of, you know, bringing stakeholders in, I think, you know, I can think of a story. There's always a few detractors, and there's some people that get really angry when you're trying to talk to them about doing something different and changing the way that they're doing their business and being strategic and thinking differently. They get angry because they don't want, you know, they're not used to that. They're not comfortable with it. And you just have to try to get them to, you know, keep moving forward and take little steps at a time. This is another learning where, you know, we used to go and try to do everything at once. Here's the strategy, lay it all out there, and it's huge, it's big, and here's all the things that have to change. That doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to take one step at a time. You have to get them to agree to a small change. Then once they agree to a small change, then you can move on to a different change. I've seen this working a couple of times where, you know, we started with big detractors, didn't want to change anything. We worked with them along the way. They probably took, in the end, half of what we wanted them to do, which was a good start. We executed and it turned out really well. And then they become one of our best, you know, best spokespersons about how, you know, what value that we bring to them. And then I mentioned it before, that's the best you can get, is when somebody from the business supports what you've done, they go and tell their peers, and it makes our jobs a lot easier.
Sam, what was your journey like?
Yeah, I'm trying to cast. It's funny because, yeah, as you kind of progress through, you get used to it. Drasko mentioned as well, you start picking up the lingo, and I think it's so. Yeah, you learn through two or three mistakes, and then you crack on. I mean, we never had any formal training. You get stakeholder management training, influencing skills, all this stuff, but it really comes actually from a different place, right? If you get into the C-suite, it has to be important to them at that point. Or if it's not important, it should be. You need to make it really clear why. And then it's getting to start with the relationship. If you don't even know them, right? Build that relationship, be interested in them, think about things they're worrying about, and put yourself in the shoes and think, actually, how can I be empathetic to what they're going through? But ultimately, you know, if they do need to get up to speed, or they do need to be part of your strategy, well, get that pitch right, the elevator pitch, rehearse it with your kids, with your team over and over, and then find that nugget, the story. Yeah, did you know that, right? When we put a celebrations box together of chocolates, it comes from here, here, and here, right? Did you need to know that? Are you happy with that? No. Okay, well, let me explain what we need to do and get that hook, right, to get their attention. One thing I found about the C-suite is, yeah, they don't have attention span, but they have always like a fact, a story that exemplifies that actually there's something to do, and give it to them. So they're my kind of skills. I think in terms of failures, God, I think the first time is, yeah, Michael, you talked about when stakeholders get told what to do, they do get angry quickly. I remember working with a plant manager on looking when I was at Carney, actually, we're looking to outsource a plant or parts of the plant. And for months, you know, they were being very polite and I was being polite. And then we got to make some decisions. Right, let's move this product. It's going to save you loads of money. And then at that point, they exploded, right? And because I had not spent any time to understand what's in it for them, right? Only the CFO was winning from this situation. And I think in this one, if I just spend a bit of time to go, I see your point, right? You've got, this is what you want to achieve. This is what you think the business for your plant needs to achieve. So actually, there's a win-win here. Actually, there's a real win-win. We can outsource this stuff, right? Which then can give you time to focus on this stuff. In fact, you can ask the same CFOs asking for savings for investment, right? To go down this path for you. And I wish we'd done that on day one. I never asked the question. I never put myself in their shoes. And I think you learn the hard way when someone gets angry with you. That's my lesson.
And we just had a question from Josette about the challenge of engaging this senior leadership team when even the organization is willing. I think I just heard in your journey, bring that box of chocolates and make them understand where it's coming from and find that nugget. So I think Josette, that's hopefully answering a little bit of what you were looking for here as well. Yeah,
we've got loads of these stories. Nail a plastic to your tree in your garden and show how long it takes before it deteriorates. And right, and you said that's the story. And this is the stuff that works really well for us. Yeah.
It's just really funny because you just talked about at the beginning that we do sometimes get trainings on stakeholder management or on influencing skills. Before you said that, I had forgotten that those things existed. And I always thought, like, no, we don't really get that. The question is that really the right way, or do we need to go through this experience in order to get there eventually?
It's difficult to say. I mean, we heard now several times storytelling being mentioned, and I literally believe this is the key in a positive sense of that meaning of that word, you know. So it's how to tell this compelling story in an elevator pitch in a couple of minutes, you know, how to describe the situation, complication, resolution, and a big so what at the end of the day. Because if you stand in front of the C-suite, they will ask you, well, why I'm here? What do you want from me, right? So, you know, telling a compelling story which will be attractive and where you will get what you want and mobilization of the stakeholders is for sure quite challenging. It's not a new skill, but it's a skill which has been a bit neglected in procurement, you know. I just read recently a quote from, I think it's an MIT or Harvard professor who said, you know, if you want to have success in business, it's three things. It's ability to generate new ideas, it's ability to speak, and ability to write, you know. And we like that so much at Cirtuo that we said, you know, the new gen AI stuff, we are integrating in the fourth version of our software to enhance the ability to speak and write, because we believe it's so critical, you know. Building comparative stories, be able to express yourself, find the right balance between the top level, the big picture and the detail. This is what really matters if you actually want to pick up and mobilize your stakeholders.
And we had another question from Jack, also to you, Michael, if you had any specific trainings, because you mentioned trainings as well. Do you have anything specific in mind that you could call out for our audience?
Well, it's funny because we talk about storytelling, and sometimes I wonder if that, as my role specifically, it becomes more and more important. I feel like that's all I do. And I feel like, you know, we have a lot of data to support what we're doing, but you can, I don't want to say manipulate that data, but you can show whatever data supports your story, right? And who's going to know differently? That's what I always tell my team is nobody else knows our area better. Nobody's going to be able to call us out and say, hey, is that number right? That doesn't sound right. You know, we know our business and we can kind of, you know, move the data and the story to where we want it to. We are actually this year looking specifically at storytelling training, and we're looking at third parties right now. We found a few that are, I think, really good, but so we haven't picked anyone yet, so I can't really say who the best is, but I would recommend looking at third parties specific with training on storytelling, because what I've seen and heard so far looks really good, and I think all of us need that.
I personally know that Harvard Business Review, they are offering something in their online classes, but I have a book called Story Scraping that I can highly recommend to everybody as well, where it's all about learning the different ways of telling compelling stories and explaining also what are the key elements of every good story. So I think that's something that every procurement professional should have a look at as well.
Yeah, let me just quickly build, just quickly on that, because I agree. We've had a third party help us on storytelling, and they tell you the art of how to piece it together. The best training I had on this though was actually from a former barrister. Right? If you think about their role, is to convince strangers. Right? Ultimately, you're telling a story to get them to make a decision, to alert them to something, right? And I think that added an additional edge to the storytelling. Right? It wasn't how do I get through my story and then okay, let's go. Let me to convince you that I'm absolutely right and you need to be with me. And I think that was probably the best training I ever had.
Well, it's funny because we don't want to get into this legal stuff here, I think. But they are very convincing, and I love watching a good American TV show where they're telling the jury what it looks like and what the story was. So, but bringing it back to winning over stakeholders now, let's gather some key success factors. So, from if everybody could just give us a little bit of an idea of what are, in your journey, from your perspective as a senior leader now, what are some key success factors for winning over people? We heard storytelling, we discussed that now, but what are other elements?
Yeah, I think we talked about a few of them, but don't assume you understand everybody's business. I've been doing procurement for a long time, so I like to think that I know a little bit. I'm pretty confident in my experience and knowledge and skills, but I also know that I can't go in and assume that I know, a business stakeholders area, what's important to them, what's their challenges, what's their opportunities. So you have to listen. You have to listen. You have to understand first about their business and about what's important to them.
And I think in our pre-discussion, one of the things that really stuck with me that you said was win them over with results as well. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, it's funny because, you have this debate about procurement policy, right? I think procurement policy is stupid. I mean, do you have to have it? Yes. But do you talk about it? No. You should never have to talk about a procurement policy. If you have to slap somebody in the face with a procurement policy, then you're not doing something right, because you have to add value that's what I tell my team all the time. If you're not, and that's what I tell stakeholders all the time, if we're not adding value to you, then don't use us, because I wouldn't use us either. I don't have time to waste with people coming in trying to help me to do my job better within this organization that aren't helping me, that aren't adding any value. I'm going to go around them. I'm going to go through them. I'm going to ignore them. And we should expect the same from ourselves, right? So if you add value, then that's the best thing you can do. That spreads, that builds trust, you should never have to go back and say, hey, do you know we have a procurement policy here? Because that just makes people angry, and that sets you back for months.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Sam, what's your take?
Yeah, I was gonna talk about building trust, and I do want to add on that, go back a tiny bit on soft skills, but yeah, building trust. Okay, you've won the argument, or you've convinced somebody enough to get going. Start proving it, right? And start small if that's what it takes, and then make the point instead of told you, and then do it quickly, so then you can then scale up. And when that moment comes where they go, I've got you, you've got my trust, go, then go quick, right? And really react fast. I think that for those early quick wins are really important. They teach you your 90-day plan. You should have a 90-day plan for your category strategy, right? If you're just kicking it off. But I do think we going back on soft skills, and I won't talk about storytelling, but I said this. I was actually DPW 2 years ago, and I mentioned as a big slide. I said, I had a quote which was, as the world's become more digital, we have to be more human, right? And it goes exactly something Drasko mentioned early on. We have got to amplify our human skills here. Yes, we have a bunch of technical skills to learn and to build out, negotiating, contracting, and so on. But we have really got to amplify what makes us human. If the process was running smooth and you didn't have to talk about policies, what would you be doing all day? And I had to someone in my team mention this. Okay, Sam, if you would take all this work away, what am I going to do all day? Well, yeah, good question. You sit on my third largest category, and for our business, and you're sitting between probably the most toughest category for the business to innovate. Guess what you're going to be doing? You're going to be joining those pieces up. You're going to be networking, right? You're going to be thinking about supply network. And I think that's something I've got to amplify. I don't know what the training course is, and I've heard some great words out there, things like love of data course or problem lifecycle management course. That's where I think we need to get into. How can we get some less technical training, more things that amplify the personas we need to be with that for our business.
And Drasko, maybe you can just build on that, because I know that you're also very passionate about this kind of intersection of humans and technology, this augmentation of skills. And making the humans not redundant, but actually more important in a way.
Yeah, sure. Again, I mentioned the whole chain you need to go through with the stakeholders, and it's impossible to do it supported with any kind of artificial intelligence. Of course, you can make it easier, and what we are trying to do actually is how to formulate, how to develop that storylining. But my important take is that there are two things which probably people approach wrong. They bring too much framework to the stakeholders. Our stakeholders don't care about 5 forces and SWOT analysis and category strategies and category management. I mean, the same way we don't care about their methodologies and their frameworks, So despite promoting category strategy through technology, we say to actually our clients, folks, your stakeholders don't care about that, you know. You just need to approach them, listen to them, and resolve basically and address their issues adequately. And also there is you hear a lot about, yes, a data-driven market insights, market intelligence, but that's just a small piece of actually coming to the right story and right storytelling. You know, we just did recently an experiment with a client where we said, you know what, let us in the first step completely ignore the market data and any other data. Let's just do the stakeholder-driven strategy model. And that was actually overwhelming. Of course, you need an external data and market intelligence and the insight to validate your strategy. But once expressing their business needs and wants, you know, actually stakeholders take into account the market conditions as well, you know. So I have rarely seen a moment where someone says, oh my God, I didn't know that market insight, it helps me a lot, it will completely change my strategy. But I see it more on the side talking to the stakeholders, where we wrongly assume they know the category, they are not interested, and so on. Once you approach them in the right way, and we tend actually to put them all in one room, if possible, of course, and to tell them the story, and then you will find out they start discussing between themselves, they start challenging themselves. So I've seen resolving most strategies for most difficult categories within 20 minutes. Once you do it right, once you develop the right story, once you explain the right situation, complication resolution, and so what, people agree very fast on things, how to move forward, because it becomes obvious what you need to do, right? So that's my thing.
I quite like that, and it all revolves around communication. So the point on the policy is all about communication, but same as you now said, and also building trust, as we heard from Sam, is all about communication. One of the things that always has puzzled me, because I've worked in global procurement and in local procurement, there's also a divide. And so what is your take on overcoming or bridging the divide between global and local teams? Not in, you know, like on the stakeholder side, but even within procurement. Like how have you managed or experienced that? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I can say that, I mean, you're right. That's a tough one. That's probably harder than working with stakeholders, I think, sometimes. You know, because there's a fear of losing control, a fear of not having work, you know, when global comes in and says, hey, thanks, we got it. You know, local doesn't necessarily like that sometimes. So it's a tough one. I think, you know, the CFOs get it right, and I guess some of this is what you try to get across to the ISM or the local teams. But you know, by us, there's a role for both of us, and there's value that each of us can create. The more we can leverage, of course, globally, that's going to do things for local markets that they can't do themselves. So we're going to be able to create value that they can't create themselves, but there's always plenty of local opportunities that they can and should focus on that typically aren't focused on as much as they should be. So there's also a lot of opportunity to tap into with local if they can just, you know, kind of trust that we're with them, we're an extension of their team, we're looking to add value, and we're looking to free up some of their time so that they can focus on more of the local that typically they don't have time to do otherwise. But it's not that easy.
It's not that easy, and it's funny because at the end of the day, there's always also when you create a strategy, there's a scoping element to it at the very beginning, where who is in scope and who is not, and you know what is the right strategy for them is something that people try to ignore sometimes, and are more like one size fits all, which is not really helpful. Sam, just because we're running out of time now, sorry, but is Mars as a family business, do you see the same things? Is that a challenge as well, or is it a little bit more collaborative?
No, definitely, and it's you're right. We don't have this global pyramid. I mean, the head office for Mars, you wouldn't know it if you walk past it. It's that is not the mentality, for good reasons, right? And we want to get the most scale with the best decision making, with the people who have to deal with the consequence of decision making. So and we deal with that tension all of the time. And I think, yeah, the root of it has to, you can do things to do right stakeholder mapping and so on, but ultimately if the setup is not right, you need to call it. Right, so if you've got two people doing the same job and having overlapping decision rights, then you're going to have a problem. Doesn't matter what you do to try and compensate. So you've got to get that set up right. And I look for two things. I look for decision rights. So ultimately, who decides? So who's going to feel the pain when you do something? And you have a lot of stakeholders say they have the right to giving you an opinion, but ultimately. Yeah, okay, but it sits on the regional P&L, right? And so we've got to get that clear, and I try to do it as fast as possible. Second thing is an org design principle around, I call it, or stole it from someone else actually, no gap, no overlap, right? Yeah, every process needs to have someone covering it, and every category, every spend, but no overlapping, right? No, you can't have dual accountability. And the RACI, I'm not a massive fan of. I'm a massive fan of just the A. Clearly, whose job is it to do what and decide what? And I think that just gets the setup clean. After that, yeah, you have matrix organizations, you have cross-functional leadership meetings, cross-segment leadership meetings, cross-regional meetings. As long as then you can get the value of where those things intersect. But I think that's why I deal with that. Yeah, otherwise you end up compensating and it'll fall out eventually.
So, and that should help clearing up that stakeholder piece as well a bit, if you have this clear assignment of accountability. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we're out of time. There was one more question that I unfortunately didn't get to now, but just to close it out, what is your number one recommendation or tip for the audience, for every category manager, on how to improve their stakeholder management skills and how to win them over? Just one. Who wants to go first?
Go, Michael.
Make it about them, not about you.
Like it. Short and sweet.
And mine's going to be pretty much the same, but I'll give a practical tip. I gave a presentation to a general manager, just 6 months ago, and they said this is the first time procurement has ever talked to me about my business. And all I did was reframe the titles to the business goals. That's all I did. Right, and I had three, and I branded it as the business goals, but it's the same text, right? So back to the make it about them. Just tactically, you can do that very quickly. You can link your stuff to their stuff and feel instantly joined up.
So again, bring the chocolate with the different boxes there. All right. Drasko, what's yours?
Just very short, I would say dare to approach senior stakeholders. It's so important.
Different.
And then practice, literally practice, error and trial, probably.
Okay. If anybody cares about what the moderator thinks, I think listen to them. Just listen before you do anything. So thank you very, very much. It was a real pleasure. I really enjoyed it. And I hope the audience also experienced it as a relatively light-hearted conversation, because that's what we wanted it to be. If you're interested in more of this content, we are having a conference coming up in April where we're just talking about category management and all of the different elements that make it great and interesting, but also all of the challenges. So check that out on the Cirtuo website. Otherwise, thank you again so much for joining in today and for listening to us and our opinions. We hope that they are helpful and that you can take 1 or 2 nuggets away for improving your relationships with your stakeholders. So with that, happy Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fabian. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.